My cousin stole my entire design portfolio, watermark and all, to land herself a real graphic design job. So I gathered the proof, emailed her employer, and got her fired. And somehow, in my own family, I'm the one who's supposed to have gone too far. Here's what actually happened. I'm 16, and graphic design isn't just some phase for me, it's genuinely what I want to do with my life. I've built YouTube banners for creators with real audiences, edited videos people actually watch, and spent years building up a portfolio I'm proud of, every single piece watermarked with my name unless someone paid me to leave it off. My cousin, I'll call her Mara, is 23, and out of everyone in the family, she and I had always been the closest. She'd call me for advice, I'd send her memes at midnight, that kind of close. She's been trying to break into design herself for a long time, months of applications with nothing to show for it, and I always felt for her, because I know how much rejection stings in this field. One afternoon she messaged me asking to see my full portfolio, said she wanted to get a feel for what employers respond to. I didn't think twice. We're family. I sent her everything, every project file, every piece I'd ever built. Weeks passed and she still hadn't landed anything. Her own parents live out of state, so she started coming around more, sitting with my parents at the kitchen table, asking them career questions, treating our house like a second home the way she always had. Nobody thought anything of it. If anything, I was glad she felt comfortable enough to keep showing up. Then one of those visits, she pulled out her laptop to show my parents her portfolio, the one she'd finally finished putting together. I glanced over her shoulder just to see how it looked, and I froze. Every single piece in it was mine. Not similar to mine, not inspired by mine. My exact layouts, my exact color choices, pixel for pixel, and where my watermark used to sit in the corner, there was just an ugly black bar slapped over it with her name typed on top instead. She looked up at me, genuinely glowing with pride, and asked if I thought it looked professional. I didn't want to make a scene in front of my parents over what I told myself might just be a weird misunderstanding, so I nodded and said nothing. I regret that more than almost anything else in this whole situation. The following week, our entire extended family got together for a big dinner, the kind where everyone shows up. Mara stood up partway through and announced she'd finally landed a real graphic design job, a genuinely good one, well-paying, with a company people had actually heard of. She talked for a solid 5 minutes about how impressed the interviewer had been looking through her portfolio, how they'd specifically praised her range and her eye for detail. I sat there getting more and more sick to my stomach, and then it got worse, because people at the table started turning to me, saying things like, "Why can't you be more focused like your cousin? Why are you still just doing this as a hobby when she's out here landing real jobs?" That's the exact moment something in me snapped. I said it out loud, in front of the entire table, that Mara hadn't built that portfolio, that every piece in it was mine, that all she'd actually done herself was cover my name with a black bar and type hers over it. The table went dead silent for a second, and then Mara burst into tears, insisting she had absolutely no idea what I was talking about, that I was clearly jealous and trying to humiliate her. I pulled out my phone right there and showed everyone the messages, her exact words asking me to send my whole portfolio, time-stamped weeks before her interview. My parents looked at the screen and still didn't believe me. My own mother asked why, if this was true, I'd waited so long to say anything at all. By the time people started leaving that night, the entire extended family had decided I was the problem, the one who caused a scene and made poor Mara cry at what was supposed to be a happy celebration. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying it over and over, the fact that I'd shown actual proof and it still somehow wasn't enough, that my own mother looked at time-stamped messages and chose to question me instead of her. The next morning I didn't say a word to anyone, I just opened my laptop and pulled every single original project file I had, the layered source documents, the raw drafts, the version history on each piece going back months before Mara had ever asked to see my portfolio. I sat my parents down separately that evening and walked them through it slowly, piece by piece, so there was no room left to doubt it. This time it landed. They apologized to me, and they called Mara, and separately called her parents, to tell them plainly that what she'd done was wrong. And that was it, though. No real consequence for her at all beyond an awkward phone call. She kept the job. She kept the portfolio. Nothing about her life actually changed, while I was the one who'd spent an entire family dinner being called dramatic and attention-seeking for telling the truth. When I first posted this looking for outside opinions, the reaction was about as one-sided as these things ever get. It ended up one of the most talked about update stories that whole month, and from what I could tell, something close to 98% of people agreed that the family's response had made the entire situation worse, not better. A huge chunk of the reaction kept coming back to one blunt point, that if Mara was willing to steal a 16-year-old's actual work just to land a job, that job was never really hers to keep in the first place, so whatever happened afterward was on her, not on the person who finally told the truth about it. Just as many replies zeroed in on my parents specifically, pointing out that choosing to believe an adult niece over their own child, even with time-stamped proof sitting right in front of them, said a lot more about how little they valued what I actually do than anything Mara herself had done. A good number of people also latched onto something I'd mentioned almost as a side note, that my own parents were more than happy to use my design and editing skills whenever it was convenient for them, but still treated the whole thing like a hobby that didn't count as real work the second defending it became inconvenient. That contradiction, more than the theft itself, was what people kept circling back to in comment after comment. And a handful of replies pointed out something I hadn't even considered, that Mara getting fired wasn't really my doing at all, it was the natural, predictable consequence of building a career on work that was never hers, and that redirecting the blame onto me was just easier than sitting with that fact. Taking a lot of that advice seriously, I put together something airtight this time. I emailed Mara's actual employer directly, and I didn't hold anything back: progress photos, screen recordings of me editing each piece, layered file screenshots showing every stage of every design, a complete history proving the work existed months before Mara had ever touched any of it. The employer wrote back fairly quickly, apologized for what had happened, and confirmed Mara was being let go. I want to be clear, I wasn't angling for her spot or trying to take anything for myself. I'm 16 and looking for an internship, not a full-time position. A few days later, Mara showed up at my house, screaming and crying on the porch. My identity was supposed to have stayed anonymous through the whole process, but somehow she'd connected the dots anyway. She told my parents exactly what I'd done, in the most dramatic terms possible, and my parents got angry at me, despite everything already being proven true beyond any doubt. It escalated into a full-blown argument. My aunt and uncle came over too once they heard, and the whole room ended up yelling at me for going too far, saying it wasn't fair to cost Mara a job she'd worked so hard for, even though every single adult standing in that room already knew exactly how hard she'd actually worked for it. At one point my mother said maybe I should have just let it go for the sake of the family, and something about hearing that broke whatever was left of my patience. I couldn't stay in that house another minute. I called a friend's mom, and she drove over and picked me up without asking a single question, just let me stay with her for a while to breathe. She even offered to sit down with my parents herself and lay out plainly who was actually in the wrong here, since apparently it needed to come from another adult for it to land. Honestly, the stealing almost isn't even the part that gets to me the most anymore. People do awful, opportunistic things sometimes, that's not exactly new. What actually stays with me is that my own family will use my skills without a second thought whenever it's convenient for them. My mom getting videos edited, my dad happy to show off a logo I made, and then turn around and treat the whole thing like it was never a real skill worth defending the moment defending it becomes inconvenient for someone else in the family. That's the part one don't think I'll get over anytime soon. So I'll leave it with you the same way I left it with Reddit. Was I wrong to get my cousin fired over this? Drop your verdict below.